So hopefully all of our webcast people can see us now, or if I don't know if they wait there for it to start or what, but hopefully they can see us now and they're not having any issues. Is everyone in the room okay to be recorded? Yep. Great. Okay. So we've got a couple more CRCs to come in and then we'll get started. Dumble Young is one of them, and I'm just calling them now. And here they are. This is Alison. Hello. Hi, Alison.
Hey.
And then we're also waiting for two more, but I think we shouldn't be too much longer, and then we can get started. But we'll just wait a couple of minutes, and they can just join in after we start if they want. I'll just be working away in the background here. I just wanted to let everyone know as well that because we're webcasting, and I haven't done this one before, I've given out a number for people to text if they have questions and things, so you might see me preoccupied over here on my phone, and I'm sorry about that if I am, but they're going to be texting through questions and things like that, so I'll field those to Joe at the appropriate times, but otherwise it's, that's all the input that they get to have today, which is, you know, wish we could have more people in here, but it's nice to be a smaller group. So this is Joe Radici,
that's a bit right.
From Dillinger Group, and he is the HR guru that we call whenever we have an issue, basically. So he's our go-to guy, and he has developed a really great project or resource that's available on the LinkWest website at the moment called Defining the Role of the CRC Manager. And that one is available for download now, and this series of workshops will be around that project, but also just really answering some key HR issues that I think crop up a fair amount in CRC, so hopefully these, the information he gives you today will be really relevant. And with that said, I'll let you take it away, Joe.
Thanks Joanna. Welcome all. I'll tell you a bit more about me, I guess, and hopefully it gives you some comfort about who this person is sitting on the other side of a camera. But Joe Radici, I've been working in HR a long time, 30 plus years. I've been doing some work with LinkWest probably for the last probably 8 to 10 years, and have done a range of sort of assignments. They've from in the metropolitan area to fairly big community resource centres, and there's a couple of people in here right now would know some of the work that I have done in relation to maybe Harvey and Augusta, certainly some stuff at Manjimup, and I think I might have had a chat before to Laura, I think in relation to Franklin River, I think it was, but it might have been Bremer Bay, no, it was Kate. So I've done a fair amount of work in that space, and we've done restructures, provided advice around about, I guess, the HR issues, about recruitment, about salary levels, about structure, and I guess it's sort of emanated from there, and we've also gone a few times to the Fair Work Commission or Fair Work Ombudsman Office in relation to representing CRCs in that space, because there has been a few of those that have happened before, not too many, but there have been, and it's always an issue about obligations and who actually fronts in that space. And I'll talk to you a bit about that, because the responsibilities of that sort of action sits with your chairperson, whoever that chairperson is. So when things happen in your particular centre, a person lodges a grievance at the Fair Work Commission, decides that I don't like this issue about a grievance in relation to maybe unfair dismissal or something like that track, it won't be you who will be called to the Fair Work Commission, it will be your chairperson. So when I talk about the things that I'm going to talk to you about, is it's really important that you can, I guess, voice your issues up the line if you need to, because at the end of the day, the chairperson is going to be the one held responsible. Okay, it doesn't sit with managers, because they won't call, and I'll use a live example. When we had twice, I went to the Fair Work Commission about a year and a half ago with the Manjimup Community Resource Centre. Twice the chairperson fronted with the manager, and twice the chairperson had to front to the commissioner and provide some advice to the commissioner about things that happen in that centre. So the clear issue is about, it'll always come back to the chairperson. So I'm going to talk about some aspects in that space, and talk about governance, because that's a really important issue for you, because you end up being the central point, the major point contact within your particular centre, and you'll have, I'm sure, floating chairpersons going through yearly, 2 yearly, 3 yearly, 5 yearly, 10 yearly, and they'll have all sorts of skills. They'll probably could be well versed in relation to business acumen, and some who probably won't. And so then the reliance on you becomes a really, really important issue in relation to that aspect of the governance part of the organisation. So I guess what I want to do, the objectives of this section is really to impart knowledge, but I'm really keen to hear about what individuals have found in their organisations, because the best way of learning is to learn from others, not just from a single source. You know, some people have had to deal with issues in that space and then have dealt with them in a good way. And so therefore, if you basically share that knowledge, then that's the best thing you can possibly have. You share the knowledge, because then people can rely on you. They'll go to you for mentoring, because I found mentoring has been outstanding in some organisations, and I know that Carmel certainly has been mentoring in relation to, I think, NANUP. I think there were some issues, well, I know there was some discussion between the two areas, and I would suspect that's probably going to be an ongoing issue. So I guess the objectives of the session is twofold. Is talk about the non-award award arrangements, the issues that you might have to deal with in terms of employees in that space, or the issues you might need to deal with up the line in relation to making sure that your management, your committee know about what it means to be a non-award and award, and the implications of being non-award, because it's a risk. It's just a risk that you need to know about, or someone needs to know about, so that they can take whatever actions you might need to take down the track. Now, I'm not advocating that everybody should be on the award. I'm just going to point out facts, okay? And I'll leave the issue about whether you are covered by an award or not covered by an award is really up to your committee, but they need to know the risks. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to you. And then if you need to explain up the line, then you can. And if they need to refer to me, they can. So the objectives of sessions, as you say, is to have that. Please, if you want to jump in any time, do so. Okay, and just tell me who it is, so that I can refer back to that particular person. But the more sharing, the better. So I can't say that strongly enough. Just the more sharing, the better. So with that in mind, what I thought I'd just start is paint a picture about award and non-award. Now, if I'm preaching to the converted in here, then I'm sorry, but I've got to start from somewhere and let you know where this whole issue about award, non-award came from. And it did emanate, I think, about, they used to have workplace agreements in the late 2000s. Federal government decided to come into place and change the whole arrangement. They had, at that particular stage, I think, the SACS Award, Social and Community Services Award in WA was the major award. And it was sort of, probably best way of describing it, all over the place, mixed bag. And there's a whole range of information about non-award award. When the federal government at that time decided to legislate and go down the track of having enterprise agreements, so they took away the Fair Work, or we would call it the workplace agreements, and put into enterprise agreements, and they had award provisions effectively covered, most of it by the federal government. Now, incorporated organisations, which is most of the CRCs, I haven't seen any yet that are not unincorporated. You all have to be covered by federal. It's as simple as that. You can't decide that you want to be covered by the state award. You can't, because effectively the legislation says you can't. So even if you've got employees employed on a non-award issue, they're covered by what they call the National Employment Standards, National Employment Conditions effectively. So even if they're being paid less than the award rate, which in this case is the Social, Community, Home Care and Disability Services Industry Award, then the conditions of employment relate back to the federal provisions, okay, the Commonwealth provisions. So you don't have a choice in that space. The only thing that's not covered is long service leave. Okay, and you'll see in there that the Long Service Leave Act in WA 1958 we'll talk about 8 2/3 weeks after 10 years. Okay, if you go and look at the SHADS award or any other, the Children's Services Award or any other federal-based award, it won't mention long service leave. Okay, because long service leave is a state provision. So therefore, any person employed under a federal award would normally refer to a state provision in terms of long service leave. And the national employment standards are exactly the same as they have been for years and years and years and years and years. 4 weeks leave, parental leave, personal leave, all that sort of stuff in there. That there's no question that that's what you have to have, and people need to make sure that they are following that provision. And because effectively, if you don't follow those provisions, then you can be taken to the Fair Work Commission. Now, there are a number of organisations I do know are not paying, if you want to call it, people under the SHADS award. Now, that is a risk. It is a risk. The risk is if one of your employees decided that they wanted to take this matter to the Fair Work Commission and to the Fair Work Ombudsman and believed that they're being underpaid, and they were able to demonstrate that they haven't been paid in accordance with an award provision, then they could, being the Fair Work Ombudsman, would probably likely send out an inspector. And if an inspector comes to your work site, he or she is able to look at everything in relation to your pay records. Everything. Okay, and then they will basically look at that and say, do we believe this person should have been paid in accordance with the SHADS award? And given organisations are called community resource centres, and you have a community or social community home care and disability services industry award, it would be hard to argue that these people, that people employed in your particular centre, shouldn't be employed under the community, under that SHADS award. Very hard. Because the descriptors, and I'm sure some of you may have seen the descriptors in there, adequately describe the roles of most employees that I've seen inside CRCs. So it's very difficult to put them out an argument saying, oh, we're non-award, we don't think there's anything in that award that covers our employees. Ooh, I don't think so. So it's a risk. So if an inspector come in, had a look, they could fine the Community Resource Centre, and they can order back payment in terms of what they believe that person should be paid. So it's always a risk, and look, I'll use some live examples of this. I won't tell you the organisation that I recently did some work in, but it's in the metropolitan area. They've probably got about 16 or 17 employees. All of them are not employed in accordance with the SHADS award. Okay, it's basically a family centre. I pointed out to them that I understood the risk and I understood the salary part, because committing to the SHADS award is significant, and I'll raise that issue in a bit of a tick. But it's a risk, because if you had a disgruntled employee who went off to the Fair Work Commission, then they probably would find that all of those employees would be back paid in terms of the salary, the difference between what they are being paid as opposed to the award provision. So it's always a risk, and they weren't that far away. They're only probably about $1 an hour difference in terms of the salaries. But they raised a very valid point, and this may well apply to a lot of CRCs, is that they can't afford it. They can't afford to cop a 4% pay rise in 2019 and another 4% pay rise or thereabouts in 2020. Because if you go back to one of the things I originally said in there about the federal government coming into place about the SHADS award, in 2012 I think they put in a thing called an equal remuneration order. It basically said people who work in the community resource centre had been underpaid, or community resource sector period had been underpaid. So they have awarded increases of around about 43% over 8 years. So between 2012 and 2020, there's about 43% increase in the pay rates of staff over that period of time. So some community resource centres, but hang on, DPIRG just chopped our budget, or our budget hasn't grown, it's not going to grow by 4% per annum. How are we going to afford that? And my answer is, I can't give you that answer. I can't tell you what you should or should not do in your particular resource centre. All I'm pointing out is that in the award provisions that you need to be mindful of that if you are going to pay people in accordance with the SHADS award, there's another 4% pay rise coming in the 1st of December. There'll be probably another 1.5%, 2%. You've already had a 1% pay rise or thereabouts in July, and there'll be another one in July 2019, and another one in December 2019, and the same with 2020. So, because December 2020 is when it stops. That's when the equal remuneration order stops, and effectively you go back to more like CPI. So it is a big impost. There's no doubt about that, that having staff being paid a pay rise of around about 4%, and I don't know what your growth in terms of your revenue for each particular each of the resource centres that I'm talking to now, but 4% is a fairly big figure. When you get maybe 120,000, 130,000 from DPERD, and you add, maybe they might increase it by 1% in terms of CPI or something thereabouts, and you're increasing salaries by 4%. It doesn't take you to rate scholar work out there. You've got a bit of a problem, and there's a 3% gap. And so, therefore, the issue about growing your business becomes even more important. Growing your business in some way, shape, or form you need to be able to do that. And the problem in that is that then you get people who might not want to come and work in the organisation if they're not being paid a reasonable amount of money in order to bring those business skills in. And there's two CRCs I can see in front of me here that probably could attest to that. And I can refer to Tracy Ann and to Carmel in relation to how it works in those two particular centres, Harvey and Augusta. Because certainly my involvement in those two particular centres did change what people had been paid. It did change their structures a bit, and the emphasis was put back to the committee that they need to have in place a structure and being able to pay people what we think was the right amount of money in order to attract the right sort of people who can then drive the business higher up the tree. So it's a catch-22. In those centres, they're fairly large, they're fairly big country towns. In other places, I'm sure in the wheat belt, and I'm sure in some of the other rural communities, and they will probably argue conversely and say, well, we don't do a lot in our centre. We basically do the community stuff. We don't do a lot of business stuff. Well, I guess my response is that if that suits you, suits you. You've got to go for what you've got to do in that space. But you just got to be mindful about the government pulled $5 million. They gave it back. I'd love to see what they're going to be doing in the future in that space, but don't ever try and read government. It's too hard. So I guess the issue there is you need to be mindful about how you can then grow your business, because effectively you are going to be the linchpin in terms of growing that business, and then you need people in your particular centres that can then help you to grow that business, because if you rely on one person, then it's basically not going to work. You need a system issues to deal with that. That was sort of the emanating parts from the, if you want to call it what I call non-award bit. I'll ask for any questions in there, and then I'll progress on. Any people got any questions in that space? No?
Just with the trainees that we come through, do they fall under the SCADS award or under the National Trainee Award?
Well, effectively the same. Effectively it's the same thing, because if the traineeship, when you go and look at the traineeship dollars, and I'll talk about the non-award rates in a tick, they're specified. There's specified salary rates in relation to that. So you can see the traineeship rates under the SHADS award. There's some traineeship rates. I think they've also got them under the Children's Services Award. So effectively, you just got to follow what's actually in there. And I think you'll find that the state provision and the Commonwealth provision won't be dissimilar in terms of the dollars. So I don't think there'll be any difference in there.
Yeah.
Just on that, because it broached the subject, Russell, which I'll raise. It's a good one. When you have non-award, and you probably would see this in the 1st of July, or this would have been back in June, that the government, I think it was the Fair Work Commission, gave about a 3% pay rise in relation to the minimum wage, $18.93. Okay, so you can't pay any of your people other than trainees less than $18.93 per hour. That's as simple as that. If you do that, if you are paying people less than $18.93, and I'm sure there would be no one in this room that would be doing that, or no one in your centres doing that, then you are basically contravening the award, and you could be found wanting in that space. So there's just an issue that people need to be mindful of. That's what they call non-award. So you can pay people whatever you like under a non-award provision as long as it's more than $18.93 per hour. Okay, so you won't be found wanting in that space, but you will be found wanting in that space if someone says, well, I'm an admin officer and I'm being paid $21 an hour, and someone looks at the SHADS award and says, well, probably you should have been paid in accordance with maybe level 3 of the SHADS award, and that's $28 an hour. So you've got $6 an hour difference. So if someone said that to the Fair Work Commission with the Fair Work Ombudsman, then you could be liable for $6 an hour for as long as that person's being employed for as a back payment. Okay, that's the risk issue in relation to making sure people are being paid the right amount of money in that space. Everything else in relation to the conditions, and look, if you ever wanted to look at this stuff, there's a whole batch of check stuff, and I'm sure you would have seen it on the Fair Work Ombudsman site. Look, there's a document here, like called a Fair Work. That way, I better put it there. It's called a Fair Work Handbook. There's other information in relation to statements from the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman's office. There's information that comes from the state government in that space. It's a lot of that information is available. I have previously put out a bit of a note to a lot of the CRCs, most of the CRCs, saying if you've got a question, don't hesitate, just give us a call. It's free. I'm not going to charge people for giving you some advice over a telephone. Okay, if you want to do that, that's an open issue for you to do. And if you have issues in relation to people and what you might need to do in the space, and there has been some questions raised about changing employment conditions, employment hours and part-time casual, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, then I've been able to most times basically resolve the problem over the telephone. So there are some aspects that I'm more than happy to provide advice on when you might, if you are confronted with an issue, or I'm sure you can ring Joanna. Okay, I'm sure the Link West will be more than happy to help in that space. So abrogate responsibilities. I can push them aside. I can go this way. You're my left. You're right. So just those aspects you just can be mindful of in relation to particularly the risk issues, and particularly for your for your management committees, because I'll talk about that, I think, now, because governance is a major part of your role, and I'm sure you would know that now. For those ones who've been in the system for a little while, and for those ones who've been here for a short time, governance is major, because effectively the organisation, and this is your chairpersons, are the legal entity to which anything comes up in that space. If there's something wrong, it'll go to your chairperson, as I said before. So the governance issues in relation to that committee, they shouldn't be interfering with your role as a manager. Okay, I've had situations come to me where the committee have got involved with people being employed. They've got involved in relation to being part-time, casual, the nature role, and they've got people sometimes coming into committee meetings and addressing directly to a committee itself. My advice is, and it's been consistent in this space, the person who's responsible for people in your organisation are you. You can't push away from that. You're responsible. So anybody who reports within the centre, casual employee, part-time employee, or a volunteer, all report up through to Community Resource Centre Manager, Coordinator, whatever that might be. So at the end of the day, the people who work in the organisation are your responsibility. Because you're the one who's going to be held to account, hopefully through some kind of performance management process, that you're the one who's held to account. So in relation to issues like being who gets paid what, then the organisation in the governance sense should be setting the direction about what they believe is the right, appropriate way for the centre to get paid. So if they say, we want everybody to be paid in accordance with the SHADS award, well then it falls to you largely to determine what the salaries of the people beneath you are getting paid. The one, you, and that'd prove the only person who would be, the salary would be determined by your committee, because they're the ones who actually have to sign it off. But any people beneath you are effectively your responsibility. So if you have committee members, and I'm sure that this happens regularly, where they get involved in relation to what Bill or Kathy or something to that effect happens, or what might happen inside a coffee shop or inside something that happens in the organisation at an employee level, then effectively the issue is about, and this is the hard part for you, is to say back off, because it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility, because you're the one who's going to be held to account for people beneath you. So if you have a person who lodges a grievance, and I'll use live examples of this, and I'm sure the people at management won't mind this, but there was a couple of years ago we had a person who wasn't feeling that flash inside the organisation, decided to take the organisation to the Fair Work Commission for a grievance, and effectively the chairperson I mentioned before and the manager had to go to the Fair Work Commission twice. And the upshot of this person ended up leaving the organisation after a workers' compensation claim. The thing that, in terms of the governance part, to come out was, and to the committee chairperson at that point, have you got a policy in relation to how you deal with grievances? That's governance. Okay, that's your committee. That's what they're responsible for. They are responsible for making sure that you have a grievance policy in place. Because if you are going to go to the Fair Work Commission, the Fair Work Commission will ask, where's your policy? And what does the policy say? And whose responsibility is to deal with the issue of a grievance? And the grievance process may well be that it comes up the line from the person to the manager to the committee, and then if it doesn't get resolved inside the committee, then what other external parts can we refer it to? And you may well have inside your constitution about aspects where you can refer matters to other parties to resolve issues. The question, the big part in there is about you've got to have a policy. Yeah, and that's the governance part in there, that you've really got to make sure that your committee understand about what their responsibilities are. And it's about policy, it's about governance, it's about those sorts of aspects that just got to make sure that the people who are running your committee understand that clearly, that that's what they're responsible for, is about policy. It's about governance, it's about reporting. And then they'd hope that they'll also get involved with the community, obviously, finding out what the community wants, because then they'll have a plan, business plans, corporate plans, whole business plans, whatever you might want to call it, strategic plans, is that's what they are there to do. They're there to prepare those or get sign off on those strategic business plans, and then for you to implement it. That's what you're responsible for, is the implementation of the directions from your committee. But hopefully you're able to influence up to those people. And I guess a question that I've seen come up a few times is, how do you manage a committee? And it's a question for you. How do you manage your committees? And how do they manage you? Because it's an interesting discussion point, and because it really comes back to those award, non-award award provisions, because it goes into your responsibilities in your job description form and about what you get paid. Because all of those things tie up in relation to what people get paid and what your roles are in particular for each particular, I guess, CRC. So let me, before that, I'll open up for a question. Is it an issue that comes up in your particular CRCs? No? No?
Joe, it's Carmel here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, certainly can.
Okay. Just wanted to check around that governance. The workshop that we attended in, I think it was Greenbushes, there was some information about what the centre manager or coordinator needs to sign off to in relation to the financials and the Treasurer's report. And they included things like the reconciliation, the bank, the balance sheet, and obviously the P&L is fine, but there are times when the Treasurer's report may not probably include the balance sheets, and yet in that workshop that we attended, it did specify that the centre manager has to sign off on those financials as well.
Yep. Well, exactly, because I think what it is from what I understand, is that you have to provide that information up to the committee in order the committee for them to make decisions about the viability of that centre. Because at the end of the day, the committee is responsible for the viability of that centre. So you provide profit and loss statements, monthlies, signing off accruals, acquittals, all of that information that needs to be done. But at the end of the day, it still has to go back up to the committee. And I guess you can use any business. You have any business in the private sector has people who are responsible for that business. And they may well have a board, or they may have a management committee that sits above that. And effectively that management committee, and in your case it's a committee, is responsible for the viability of that centre. So it's about making sure that they've got the information that they can make strategic decisions on. That's the key thing in there. So you're providing them with valid information to say, we've got $50,000 in the bank, and we've got $20,000 of bills coming in, so we've got a $30,000 balance sheet at the moment, and that's going to save us, that's going to take us through the next 2 months, and then we get another payment from DPERD, and we'll be okay in that space. So all they're making sure is that there's enough money for the bills to be paid based on the information that you provide. Is that the answer to your question, is it?
Yes, it does, thank you. The parts of that also include things like the asset register, and the asset register and how that is calculated, I suppose, or determined, through your finance officer and your treasurer. And I'm not a qualified accountant, so you're relying on the information that goes into your accounting system, and I'm sure it's correct. But when you're signing off on something, if you're not I suppose, savvy or qualified to drill down into some of those things, and your liability as a result of the asset register, that can make it a little unclear at times too. So what you're actually is being presented, if I'm not an accountant, I'm just going on the figures that I see, not how it's calculated.
Yep, you're right. And I guess it's like any business. You may not have all of the skills in the people that work in the business, but hopefully you've got people who are on the management committee who might be skilled in that space, and to give you some comfort about what it is that you are actually providing information on. If it's the asset register or whatever it might be, is you need some comfort about people providing you with the right sort of advice. And if you're not comfortable in that space, I guess it can become a learning issue for you. That should I enrol in some kind of course that gives me some comfort about understanding what I'm reading? And so it's an issue about developing in that space too, because you can't push back and say it's not my problem, because in the CRC you're not big enough to push the problem somewhere else invariably, because you end up being the jack of all trades and master of all too, because that's what you have to be.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions in there? I heard someone else say. No? Cool. Okay. Now let me get on there. So some of the parts in here you just got to be mindful about in relation to the Fair Work statement. And this stuff here, you can get all this information, which I've got here in front of me. About $18.93 is the part-time rate. One of the issues that's come up regularly from my perspective is being part-time as opposed to casual. Okay. Now, there's a real big issue for you in this space, is that if you have someone that comes in regularly on Tuesday every Tuesday for the next 6 weeks or 6 months or 1 year, that's not casual. Okay? Casual is when you have someone ring up, can you come in tomorrow? And can you come in the next day? And then don't come in for the next 5 days. And then ring them up again, and then they come in the next 2 weeks after that. What we've found is a lot of times is that organisations have used the casual arrangement to basically allow them to bring people in when they want to bring them in, but on a regular basis. And that is not casual. And in that space then, you know, the 25% loading that you see in the rates, the most times you get those rate differences. If someone decided to take you to the Fair Work Commission and they're able to demonstrate that they regularly work on Tuesday, and one of the organisations that did some work in of recent time was exactly that. They had some people who used to come in every Tuesday, and it was said, that's not casual. And I said, but they only come in once a week. But it doesn't matter. If it's 1 day a week for 2 hours, that's part-time. Okay? If it's more than 2 hours, it's part-time. So you've got to be mindful about what you're doing in that space in terms of employing people correctly. Because if you don't, then they could take you back to the Commission and say, you're up for annual leave. That's the basics of it. So you just be mindful about how you employ people and what contracts you give them. And we've advocated pretty strongly. It's on the Linkwest website. We've actually provided a pro forma, we want to call it contract of employment for people, part-time or casual. That's there. We actually ran that past Department of Prime Minister's Regional Development back in May, I think it was. And their answer to me was it's the best one they've seen. So it's there, it's available. Then I'd probably suggest if you want to use it, use it. And if you need to change your existing contract to this new contract, you can, but you need to get employees to say yes to it. So just be mindful about those aspects that you can do, because in reality, you're just going to it's just really, really important stuff in there, because they can also be a risk for you in relation to people taking to the Commission, Industrial Relations, or the Fair Work Commission. The minimum or the maximum hours is 38, and you would see that under, doesn't matter if you're a non-award, the maximum hours you can employ people is 38. I think most of you would be working part-time. You're working part-time? Yeah, I've got a few nods, heads in there. I don't think too many people working full-time in... Pardon?
I'm full-time.
You working full-time? No. So they increased yours?
My contract is between 25 and 40 hours, and I average 70 hours a fortnight.
Oh.
With a lot of volunteer time in as well. It's just, yeah, too difficult to do less than that.
So how do they compensate you in that space, or give you time off in lieu transfer?
I get paid. We've budgeted to allow me to work the 70 hours a fortnight. So yeah. All of our staff are structured. The finance office and the admin is 10 to 25 hours. Mine is 25 to 40, and then we've got training. So that's how they've structured it.
You're the same, Russell?
So can't remember how many hours I'm acting manager, and then I do tech work. So get paid as a full-time.
Okay. That's really interesting, because it's the way, I guess, when we first some of the CRCs is that we thought 20 hours was probably about right in terms of some of the medium-sized centres in terms of hours for the centre manager, and then I think some of the things we tried to do, and it certainly was the case, I think in Augusta, when we got decreased the amount of hours for the manager, but increase the hours of the admin and finance and that sort of stuff, because it's making sure that the manager works at the right level and gets paid the right amount of money for the right amount of work that person does, rather than being paid as an admin. And so that's an issue. Yep.
Sorry, on that, it was actually the opposite. It was the previous manager was employed for over 30 hours, and then it was reduced to 20. But I'm not sure how others feel across the network. But with governance being so important and the role of, you know, what the centre manager is responsible for, personally, I think the 20 is too low. And then, of course, to get the job done, you're building up your time and lieu, but then you've got the counter effect of that you can't really accrue more than 3 weeks' time and lieu. So it's sort of a bit of a, you know, never-ending cycle where, conscious of not accruing too much time and lieu, either changing that policy or changing the hours, obviously, the two outcomes that you need to, or processes you need to look at.
Okay, it's interesting because I guess it's the growth of CRCs that has happened in that space, and that's a good thing. But also on the other side of the coin, the governance issues become even more and more and more important because it's the reporting part. It's being able to show that you've got money. It's being able to grow the business, and I guess going in this space. There's no horses for courses. There's no right or wrong in this space. It's about at the time when we did some work at Augusta, the previous manager was probably more working on maybe things that he wanted to do rather than things that the centre needed to be done. And now, conversely, now you're in the chair, it's probably more about what the centre needs to be done is pushing your hours up. So I guess it's one of those issues that it's all horses for courses. But all I can advocate is that the more you can do in, I guess, grow your business, the better you're likely to be in the longer term. And that means if you have to get people in doing on project work, or you need to take on more of a role, I guess that's between you and your committee, and particularly looking at your business plans. You know, I talked about strategic plans, business plans before. Is what direction does your committee want to take you? Because it's an aspect that you might think this is what we want to do, and I guess you have to get their endorsement to sign off on what direction you're trying to take. And that comes back to that governance aspect. Another part of their governance aspect is that then you are actually delivering on the things you need to deliver on and being assessed on the things that they want you to deliver on rather than what you think you should be delivering on. But at the same time, too, you've got a committee that's probably, in some cases, maybe not able or capable of looking in that space in the longer picture because I just moved into Augusta and I like Augusta, and someone told me I should become the chairperson. Someone nominated me. I went to the AGM and I got voted in, and I go to a meeting once a month. It's pretty cool, you know. And that's all I basically do. It's a real challenge for you. There's no doubt about that. And I can't tell you there's a right or wrong in what they should do in this space. All I can tell you is that you need to influence as much as you possibly can up the chair, up the line, and at the same time know where you are where your responsibilities start and finish in that space. Is really, really important.
We've got a comment on the text line. We've got one. John at Bridgetown. Hi, John. He says, great advice as usual. I keep my staff on non-award contracts and make sure the workspace is a great place to work.
Yeah.
So not so much a question, but just comment on awards from John.
And look, and we've done some work with John down in Bridgetown before, and so there's no right or wrong in this space. You just got to be mindful about the risk, and that's all I basically do is provide the advice on the risk. And the risk is if you get a disgruntled employee and they take you to the commission, then you could have a bit of an issue. If you've got a great workplace and everybody's reasonably happy, and I'll put this on the line, the organisation I did that work in earlier on this year, 18 employees, not one of them were disgruntled, not one. They really loved their workplace. So therefore, they were unlikely to take the issue to the Fair Work Commission or Fair Work Ombudsman. But if I didn't tell that committee about the risks, then I'm abrogating my responsibilities. I'm just basically saying I'm washing it away. So all I'm doing is raising it in this space, and I'll leave that to you guys in terms of what you should or should not do. The long service leave part is really an issue that has come up a few times in relation to what people are entitled to get, and we've seen. I'll raise this one that did come up in a discussion, particularly when I was down at Harvey. The way that the committee had prepared the employment contract for the previous manager effectively meant this person was getting 13 weeks leave after 10 years and was also entitled to get pro rata, etc. Now, everybody, you can do what you like in that space, or your committee can do what they like in that space. If they want to give you more than what's in the minimum conditions, then that's fine. Okay? So if a committee says we're going to give you 13 weeks leave after 10 years of service, when the standards are you get 8 and 2/3 weeks after 10 years, then there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? It's got to be mindful about what it's doing in the bigger picture, because effectively it's going to give you an extra, which is great for you, extra 5 weeks pay after 10 years of service. And we've done work in some organisations where we've actually put in incentives and said, we'd love to keep people here longer. The longer you're in the organisation, probably the more value you are to the organisation. So we had people leaving after 1 or 2 years or 2 years of service in a community sector organisation, and they approached us and said, what can we do? And I said, well, we'll change it. We'll basically provide them with an ability to get pro rata long service leave after 5. So what it means, if you stay in the organisation for 5 years and they decided that there was 5/5 or half of the long service leave that you normally are entitled to get after 5 years, and that is an attraction for people to stay, then do it. Okay? Whatever you see in the National Employment Standards, they are the minimum. It doesn't stop you actually deciding to do something more than what's actually in the minimum. Okay, so that's the minimum. It says National Employment Standards, minimum National Employment Standards, not maximum. So you can do what you like in that space in deciding to make it more attractive for people to want to stay. We've seen organisations provide bonuses. If they want to provide a bonus, great. My question is, if you're being funded by the government, and largely funded by the government, then how do those bonuses work? Is it because of the work that comes in from the private sector, or the business that you've been able to agenda from the private sector? So there's issues that you need to be mindful about how you would do that, because invariably it's government money that you could be spending. A large portion of your budget is government money. Then if you're going to decide to award bonuses, then the government might want to say, well, what are we getting? What value are we getting out of our 120,000? And you're paying bonuses that we weren't getting before. What's the differences? And it could be an attraction retention bit. So we've done attraction retention bonus, payments quite a bit. The SHADS award is pretty good in relation to salary. Up until about 2013, it wasn't that flash. Now, 2018, it's pretty good now because you've probably got another 25 or 30% pay rises. In some organisations, and this is fact, that we actually suggested to them they actually pay their staff attraction retention benefits of $1 an hour or 50 cents an hour or $2 an hour. In one case, this is for a manager, she was being paid $5 an hour. So because that organisation was turning over well over $1 million a year, and they wanted to try and attract the best person they could to get into that job. Best person was attracted to that job. That organisation now is a really, really high-flying organisation. It's well respected in the government sector and also the private sector and the community sector, and largely comes back to because of what the manager was able to do and how we attracted the right manager to come and work in an organisation. So there's issues about what you're talking about, salaries and attraction retention benefits. We always advocate to keep the award rate as it is and put the attraction retention benefit over and above the award. So if the award rate is $40 an hour and we said to someone, you might need to pay an attraction retention benefit of $2, then the $2 is the $2 additional on top of the award rate. So when the award rate increases, 1st of July, or 1st of December 2018, the award goes up to $41, then it's $41 plus 2. It's now 43. Previously it was $40 plus 2, 42. So you don't play around with basically the whole award rate because it becomes too hard to try and manage. And in a salary sense, much, much more difficult. And what we suggest in there a lot of times is about people could probably put a time frame on it. We'll review it every 12 months. So right into things like employment contracts, you can do that. So you might have a SHADS award that says you've been paid level 6 year 3, $42 an hour, $41 an hour, I'm just picking a figure. And you also get an attraction retention benefit of $2 over and above that 43. We're going to review that every 12 months. And it's based on being able to deliver the things that we think you should be able to deliver on, and you might have some key performance targets. That these are things you need to be able to deliver on. And then the committee can look back and say, okay, well, the next 12 months, we can't afford it. Our budget's too tight. We don't think we're going to need the amount of work we did in that performance part, so we're cutting you back to 41. And that's happened quite regularly. I've seen that happen quite regularly. It's a good way of bringing in people who are high flyers, if you want to call it that, and you might bring in people on projects to do that. Where you might need to go out to the marketplace for some employment strategy or something that's in this community sector, mental health work, or all that sort of stuff that I can see that could happen in the community resource centre, is you might need to be a bit flexible about how you might bring people in. And if you've got grant money that's available and you can make some provision for budget for that, and so we're going to, instead of paying a person at SHADS Award level 3, we're going to pay them at level 3 plus $2. Then you've got 12 months of salary in that space. Well, you can do that quite easily. And all you need to do is add it on to whatever's in the employment contract. You've got an employment contract that will say something to the word that person gets paid at level 3 of the SHADS Award. And then you might decide that on top of that, plus an attraction retention benefit of $2. Very simple. Very, very simple. Person signs off, you sign off, get on with the job. And you can review that any time within the 12-month period. So if you've got a contract for that for 12 months, then review it up to 12 months. And so let's go back before, the issues in it about the national employment standards and the salaries and the minimum rates, etc., are minimum. You don't have to follow those obligations. They are the minimum. So if you want more than that, you can do that. You're entirely your call in a way that you can influence up to your committee above, particularly, and how you go out and employ people. Because it's a really important aspect to be mindful of, that they're minimum. They're not the maximum rights.
Another text from John. Another comment, he says, as manager, I've been able to reduce my hours by empowering and developing other staff. You are correct, our role is more than 60% governance. Yeah, it's an interesting one. For managers doing the work at the management level and the hours are there, and I guess Tracy Ann and Carmel can attest to that, then great. I think that's fantastic. One of the things that we always advocate to committees and to managers, in fact, is to try and delegate as much as you possibly can, because if you build the job around you and build the centre around you, it will fail. In the bigger picture, it will fail. Because effectively, if you leave, get hit by a bus, taken by a shark, down in Augusta somewhere, Carmel, hopefully not. but the issues in there is about, you've got to build it around system rather than people. So that's a really important aspect to be mindful of, and John was right in that space, is that you need to be mindful about what you are doing, because you need to build the system rather than the person. Because if you build the person and the person goes, what happens to the system? It falls over. So just be mindful in that space about trying to give people, I guess, the development opportunities that they can. But then on the other side of the coin is that you've got to make sure that the people that you've got are capable of doing that too. And it's not about just saying, oh, well, I'll just hand this on to this finance person, knowing that that's not going to work. And we've seen that happen quite regularly in some CRCs, that the centre manager or people beneath that centre manager become very friendly,
They become more personal rather than business. And your first and primary look at is from the business. The next part is about the personal part. So I guess I always say this regularly to organisations is look at function, structure, positions, people, not the other way around. Okay, so look at what you are doing. So you've got your governance, that's your function, they're the things that you need to do. What structure do we need in place to deliver it? You know, centre manager, finance person, admin officer, projects, whatever it might be in that space. What do you want the jobs to do? So you've got a job description form that actually tells the people what they're required to do. And then you go and engage people. So you go and hire someone to do that job. And then you assess them based on what that role is about. And then it all links back up to the function. Because if they're not actually delivering the function, then why is the person there? And what do you want that job to do? I guess that's what it comes back to. And being flexible and adaptable. And we've seen this regularly too. We've seen job description forms that are very prescriptive. 2 or 3 pages of duties. And I think Tracy Ann and Carmel would attest to the JDFs that we actually provide these days are normally no more than 2 pages, maybe sometimes 3 at the maximum, normally 2. And they'll have a very broad range of duties, very broad, because it's about being adaptable and being flexible and being capable of undertaking more variety of work. Because if something stops in relation to some kind of work that a person's been doing, then if they aren't capable and able to do something else, then what happens to the person? And you invariably find you have to go and say you've got to go and find another job somewhere else. So what we try to do in there is create jobs that are pretty broad and then paying them appropriately so that they are capable and able of doing other things. Not saying it's not in my job description form. You didn't employ me to do that. No, we employed you to do a whole range of admin and finance work, and these are the things we want you to do. That's a very important aspect just to consider in that space is about adaptability and capability of the people, but more importantly, what you want those jobs to do and how you're going to assess the deliverables on that job and the outcomes that you are expected from that job. Because then that's the person about the capability part, about developing people, about being able to do other things, and particularly do your job maybe, or someone to do your job when you're not there. Because you don't want to rely on people.
Yeah. That's something that I'm still trying to work out with in terms of leave. How that's going to happen, because I'm the person that covers for everybody.
Yeah, it's a problem in there, Tracy Ann, is that once you've got the structure in place, and yours is reasonably new, I guess, in that space, it's pretty new, and the people working in the organisation are pretty new, and it's just the same as you are, pretty new. So it's about basically working about how you're going to, empower people to do some of the work that you are currently doing, and how you can delegate that work down the track, and provide them with the capability and ability to do that work too. Your job is not going to stop. It's a never-ending job in that space, because if you stop developing the people beneath you, then effectively you're stopping the organisation progressing. Because all it does is look at me. It's me. Everything revolves around me, and the circle is around me, rather than the centre is the big. That's what you're basically trying to do. And in the middle in there is called objectives. Your business plan, your strategic plans. They're the things that you're aiming to deliver to make the centre bigger, and hopefully it gets bigger. The centre gets bigger. You take on more things. You take on broader roles and capable and able to do that. Because as you become more important, then the likelihood of centres closing becomes less of a risk. Because you don't want to be involved with this, and certainly I can remember the Premier basically saying, I just think these guys, all they did was telephones. All they did was about people going in and maybe going into the centre and getting on the computer. And that's all that CRCs are about. I remember that. That was probably March.
It wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't. Yeah. So what I guess it's effectively saying is that the more you can, I guess, show yourselves as being the hub of the town or the community, whatever it is, the better. And so that relies on you in what you do and what your committee does and the people who work for you do. So it's about that, trying to make that, I guess, a more rounder approach, and so you don't rely on an individual. Because if you rely on an individual, then it's more difficult. But I also acknowledge there's probably some small centres who probably just rely on one person. And that might be some woman working in whatever small country town, somewhere in the wheat belt, doesn't do a lot in relation to the community resource centre or community resource at work, or could be another organisation or another centre manager that works under the guise of a local government. And they don't see that as the local government organisation may not see it as important as some of the other things that they do, but they don't mind having the money that comes in the door from the Department of Primary Industry Regional Development. So it's about, you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing in that space is that it's for the centre, and for the centre, the bigger picture of the centre being, I guess, more relevant to the community. Any other comments in there, in that space? Hello? Okay. Now, I'm just going to briefly touch on a couple of aspects in this governance bit. I'm going to find my paper here. So I've got there's issues about the board composition. Now, I don't know how much influence you can have in relation to who comes onto your management committees and boards. Are you able to influence it? How do you influence who comes onto a board or committee?
I would just have discussions on, because we're just a small community, so, and on our board, we like to have people that have a skill set that we can use, not just, we just don't want to put it out there and see not all apply to be on the committee, and then get somebody who really doesn't have, not that they don't have skills, but don't have the correct skills that we feel that we need to go forward as a community resource centre.
Do you write down the skill set that you want? Do you actually put something down on paper? Yep. I want a treasurer. I want someone who's got financial acumen, or
someone who's got financial attributes, or someone who's good in marketing, or someone who's got a good connection with children, or or with the seniors. Someone who someone who's got a connection with the local council. So.
Okay. Because the more you can influence in that space, the better. And the committee itself needs to then make sure that it's replacing itself, if that's a good word to use. If Joe leaves, who is likely to fill in Joe's job as the treasurer? Who's someone that has those skills? Because it's really important in that space you get the replacement parts at your committee level right too, because they can impede your job as a manager. Someone who's a bit not sure about in that space can influence big time other committee members in relation to how that particular centre is managed. And I'll use a real example in here. This was another small organisation that I did some work in about a year and a half ago. I won't tell you, it was one of the community resource centres. It was in the southwest. But effectively, there was a fairly major conflict between the committee members and the centre manager. And the committee members were thinking they were doing the right thing, but in reality they were basically doing the wrong things. And the wrong thing basically is they were impeding the centre from actually expanding and doing the things it needs to do. And they were basically restricting the manager about what that manager could do. And they all thought they were doing the right thing. And these particular committee members are probably more in the elderly bracket, and I'll put my hand up. I'm one of those guys in the elderly bracket, so I can say that. And it made it more difficult for that centre to, I guess, get on with life and get things done. And one of the questions I asked them about how was it they got into the role of being on the committee, and basically said, well, no one else did it. No one else would put up the hand. And that makes it really challenging in that space for you then to manage in that organisation, because please tell me if I've got this wrong. Are you beating your head against a brick wall sometimes in terms of trying to make change in that space? And then, so in terms of making sure you get the right sort of coverage in there, we have advocated sometimes that each of the committee members tells about who they are and what they've done. And then effectively, then you've got some kind of understanding about their skill set and what they're able to bring to the committee, and areas where you might not be able, where you might be able to go and canvass to get someone who can pick up those bits. So that it's just an aspect that you can consider in that space as your role as the manager, because remember this influencing up to the committee, then it's your role effectively to try and influence up to the committee to say, look, I think we really need to get someone who can advocate on their behalf to the local government, to the current local government, because they're not helping us much in that space. Who could do that job for us rather than put it on the centre manager? Maybe someone could do some advocacy on our behalf to the local government organisation that's there, or maybe do some advocacy to the local parliamentarian, because they know that parliamentarian very well. So it's picking and choosing about who you try and get onto your committee, and you might have, basically, if you can influence in that phase to get someone in there for a year or two to do the things that you need to do, then that helps you big time, because otherwise it becomes back to you, and therefore you end up working more hours. You're trying to cover everything that you possibly can, and I've seen this happen. One organisation of recent time where the committee were asking for the manager to do up a tender brief, respond to a tender. But the manager also had this massive amount of workload. So who's going to do this work? And the committee says, "Oh, we'll do it." And my answer was, if you ask a volunteer to do some specific things for the organisation, then you are on a slippery slope to destruction. Because the volunteer can say, "I don't want to do it. Oh, why should I? I've got no reason to do that." So the buy-in in relation to getting people who are good committee members and actually taking on responsibility to assist the management is a great thing. Because as much as you possibly can, you need to push out as wide as you possibly can to get people to do things that you can't do or don't have the time to do. So it's about using that as much as you possibly can. And go on.
Sorry. Alison, it kind of looked like you had something to say before, is you were kind of looked like you might want to add something. Is there anything that you were going to say?
No, I'm all okay, thank you.
Okay.
All good, thank you.
You were kind of getting...
And I guess the other part in there is that your board and committees, they need to know their responsibility, their legal responsibilities. And I pointed those out before about some of the things in the Fair Work Commission, is that they need to know about what their role and responsibilities are and where they should stop and start. And to a large extent, again, you can influence that by basically pointing out that anything in relation to the management of staff is my responsibility. Okay? It's not for you to be involved in relation to things that happen inside my area of responsibility, because once you start allowing that to happen, and don't stop it, what can happen in that space is that employer will go to that board member or committee member and just basically dump all of their problems on that person, and then they'll undermine you in some way, shape or form, or could undermine you in some way, shape or form, and then you become disgruntled. The organisation becomes a bit of a not a good place to work, because you're not sure about trust. Who can I trust? and who can I basically rely on to do that work without someone going behind my back talking to a committee member about something that might happen in my workspace. So the only way you can stop that is to say to committee members, anything that happens to my employees, I'm more than happy to have a social conversation with them, but don't talk about work. Don't talk about things that happen in this workspace, because it's got to come from me, so you get one source of comment rather than, I think this is what happened, and this is what I think should have happened, rather than you saying, well, this is what happened. So it's just an aspect to make sure that you get that in there, that part in there.
We have another comment from John. Thanks for your texts, John. He says, I annually check that my current management committee members are continuing or resigning, and where vacancies appear, I personally embark upon a recruitment process to ensure that the vacancies are filled with competent people. I never allow it to be a matter of luck.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I actually had a question for you, Joe. When you talk about, there's obviously, your committee has a strategic focus and a manager has more of an operational focus, and you don't want to allow a committee member or the committee to really override your decisions as a manager upon staff. If you're asking managers or coordinators to really, recruit for committee members, and in small communities, a lot of people know each other and those sorts of things. How can you ensure? And I'm not suggesting that this happens, but how can you ensure that a manager doesn't take full control of a centre? If the committee is, if the committee is on their side, how do you stop it from being a bit of a dictatorship with, one person's really in charge?
Well, I'll answer that question by giving you, this is another real life example where the committee this was a family basic centre a little bit north of Perth, where the committee relied totally on the centre manager in relation to everything that happened inside that particular centre. And the centre manager, and I'll put this in the nicest possible way I can say it, but she bluffed them. She bluffed the basically committee, saying that I should get paid in accordance with the SHADS award, for example. This is a small organisation that got about $60,000 a year funding, and the person was working 30 hours a week, and she wanted to get paid at level 6, year 3. And she got it. Okay? And she gave them basically a scenario saying, that's what I should get paid. And the committee had no idea about whether it was right, wrong or indifferent. And what it meant was that they had a budget of $65,000 and $60,000 was going to one person. So they had $4,000 left to run their centre per annum. They were getting some money from parents, etc., from other bits and pieces, but nonetheless, the money that was being spent was $60,000. And we would always advocate that maybe you might be spending maybe 75, 80%, 85% total of salary on people of your total budget, thereabouts. But this person had basically bluffed the committee by saying this is what should happen, and they accepted it because they had nothing else to go to. They had no one else to go to. And this person had probably used her position to influence that committee to make decisions that they should never have made. And if they hadn't changed, if we hadn't put in some changes in there, then they'd be broke. So we had to change it by saying no, and we did put a new structure into place and reduce the salaries back, reduce the hours back, and effectively reduced it back to around about $50,000. So they got actually now $15,000, $20,000 per annum that they're able to spend. The point of contact in there is about she used her ability to influence the committee and I guess the people who are on that committee to come on her side, except that the next committee that came in had this legacy, if you want to call it a legacy, to deal with the problem that someone else had created. So my advice in here is to say, all you can do is influence. You can't elect people. You can influence about what people can come on to committees, but you can't actually elect them. So what hopefully you're doing is about trying to further the cause of the committee or of the CRC rather than you. And that relies on you and your behaviours and the way, your values, etc. I'll profess about values in a little while longer, but about values, about what's important and the community resource centre itself. When you're in a small town, a small town, I guess, is that reputation is massive. Personal integrity is massive. In this space, this was somewhere in the metropolitan area. The person was only caring about who was in the mirror, wasn't really concerned about too much else in that space. And the organisation couldn't see the issues in that space. So I'll wait for you. It really came back to, that's okay, into the role of the committee knowing about a little bit more than they did because they were totally reliant. And so I talked about, there's governance bits, about responsibilities in terms of salaries, about reporting, about roles, responsibilities, about risk, about vision, about mission. That's what the committee's about. So they should be focusing on those aspects. So I guess I go back and say you can only influence about getting the right people who can deliver on those issues. It's not about you saying who should be on that committee or not. It's about you being able to influence that committee saying, I think we really need someone who can do this sort of work, and they will say yes or no, because at the end of the day, that committee are the owners of the CRC. For as long as they're on that committee, they're the owners, the part owners of that CRC. So be mindful about that. That's what they are, because they can tell you what to do. So they're the owner, and while they're there, they can tell you what to do in terms of their vision, their mission, their objectives, etc. They've got a framework sitting above it, and that's called Department of Prime Minister for Regional Development. So obviously they've got a contract that they have to deliver on, because they can withdraw the contract any time, as you probably know, Tracy. That's what they were going to do at Harvey at one stage last year. I think it was last year.
They actually did.
Did do it.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of governance to get it back.
So the issue is about that's what can happen in that space, but at the end of the day, they are the owners of the organisation, and they're the ones going to be held to account. And that's why DPERD, I'm sure, would have written to the chairperson of Harvey at the time, saying there's a problem, and we're going to withdraw your funding, and they did. And then they gave it back, which was nice. So yes.
Kim?
Sorry, I have to go. We've got a local funeral today, so I'll have to sign out. But thank you very much.
No problems.
Thanks, Kim.
Just the other aspects, just in terms of the committee itself, just about integrity and accountability, about organisational building. One of the things we really profess that committees should be looking at is values. If they set the values for your organisation, then it's far easier for you to then incorporate those values about how you treat people and how you actually run your organisation. And please, when I talk about values, I hear people saying respect and all the buzzword stuff that you talk about values. My answer to that is no, tell me what you actually do in order to deliver those values. So it becomes, rather than an intangible issue, it becomes, like a buzzword, like our values on there about respect, integrity, and all those fancy bits. Well, my question was, so how do you respect people? What processes do you put in place to respect people? How do you provide an opportunity for have an open dialogue in your workplace, because that's what you want? Well, how do you do that? Because that's the things that matter. It's not about the buzzwords. So if your committee says we want a value statement to say we're an open, honest, ethical, accountable organisation who respects our community's input to this, whatever it might be, okay, well, how? And that comes back to you. So that how are you going to then incorporate the values that have been set by the committee in the work that you do in your organisation? Because they're the things that matter the most. Because people they'll look at some words that you say on a piece of paper, but actions. It's about action. So if you've got action statements saying these are the things that we need to do in order to make sure we follow those values, then you'll get people along with the ride. They'll come along for the ride. They won't come along for the ride if you say, oh, yeah, well, that was yesterday. We're not going to do that today, or something to that effect. You know, that was important in that aspect, but not important today. If you're going to have these values, you need to live them, and you need to work with them every day, because that's the way you change culture. It's about cultural shift. It's about behaviours. It's not about job description forms. It's not about roles and descriptions, etc. It's about how you act in the workplace, because it leads into that. The role of a CRC manager in that space is about how you behave, becomes a mirror about what you want the organisation to look like. And the organisation should be pushing to you about what do they want that organisation to look like. So your committee in that space has a big say about what the values should be. And you can influence that by saying we want to be an open, accountable organisation that respects and all these buzzwords. And then my next question would say, well, okay, so how are you going to do it? Because the how becomes you. There's no doubt about that. It falls in your space. It's about what you're going to do in that space. So you've got all this stuff. So I'm working off these bits in here. One of the things is about the board's effectiveness to operate. Hopefully, they don't get down into too much of the detail about what you do every day. Hopefully, they're in the picture of saying, we might have some functions coming up in the next couple of weeks, and something that's happening, whatever location it might be. Have we got all in place? Has everything been done to make sure that's all happening? And effectively, that's your responsibility. And it's afterwards, when they've actually delivered it, then the board can start going back to the community and saying, did we deliver the things we think we should have done? Did we actually do what we said we're going to do? And if it's not, then they should come back to you and say, well, we could have done this better. So it's about making sure in that space about what you are doing and how you do things, but the what is yours. The what, how you go about it and what's been done is yours. It sort of sits in your space. They were the main things I wanted to talk about in that arena, and there's a couple of other bits I wanted to talk about. But any questions in that before I progress on to that? I guess the role of the CRC manager and maybe the competencies that sit within. Obviously, what I see as CRC, because I'm going to ask you a question very shortly. You tell me what you think your role of a CRC manager is. I'm really intrigued to find out what people think their role is and what their role is.
Joe, Carmel here. On the area of reporting and the reports that the centre manager provides to the management committee each month, I think what I've found is that real balance in the prior to myself, I think the manager's report was very, very brief, and it was just everything's going well, and that was it. I've sort of gone, I suppose, the other end of the scale because there was that lack of information being provided. But it's more about saying, this is for your information so that you know that the governance is there, you know the operations, you know the grants that are being applied for, you know that any discrepancies in financial. But then it's that balance to basically say, this is information only sometimes. It's not necessarily needing change in direction or decision because that's operational. So again, like you're saying, if it's about staff issues, there's an item which is HR. And it's not saying I need your approval or change. It's for an FYI, so you ensure that you know what's going on within the centre. So I suppose it's that balance of reporting enough. So if I was sitting on a management committee, I'm comfortable the direction, the viability, the sustainability, what's happening with staff, as opposed to then saying, I actually don't need now you to change it. You can ask questions by all means and get clarification, but it's that operational side as well.
Yep. And look, that's a good thing. Like I advocate that very strongly in relation to keeping people as much informed as possible as you can. But there's ability to actually just inform rather than ask. So it's about, this is what's happening. rather than asking, is this okay to what's happening? And you've got to be able to, I guess, put it into such a way that the committee feel that they're engaged, that they're actually involved with what's happening in the CRC, because that's really, really important. Now, otherwise, I just come to a meeting every month and I sign off on some annual, some financials every month, and we talk about some things that are happening in the future. But really, you need to be able to show to them that this is what actually did happen, and this is the things that you need to be aware of. But they're only for your advice. They're just for your basically information. So they become more entrenched in the organisation, and the more ownership you can get, the better. You know, because you don't want to have a situation where they feel like they're on the outer, and they're not actually in it. You want them to be in it, but you don't want them to be operating in it. Maybe that's the best way of describing it. And say that that's what you want to do. But please come and talk to me anytime. And the more you get people involved, the better it is for you. Because when you come to a time where you want to ask a specific question and get some a specific answer about something, proposal you might be doing on a grant, whatever, is that the more people can say that, gee, Carmel's really good in that space, she kept me informed, and I know what's happening, I know about this and this and this, then it's much, much easier. Much, much easier, rather than come from a surprise issue about, oh, well, I never engage, I don't know what the person does. I go to the meeting once per month, I do a committee meeting, I sign off on some papers, I walk away, I don't get much involved in terms of other things that happen in there. The more you can get them involved, the better. But it's the outside looking in bit, not the inside looking out bit, which is the really important part.
I think it's protecting your committee as well. You know, if they don't know, then and governance and financial viability sits with them as well. If they don't know, then you're not really protecting them.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, where does the contract come from? It comes from Department of Prime Minister Regional Development. So they're really interested from the community perspective, because that's what they're doing. The government are doing this on behalf of the community. That's what they're paying the CRC to do things on behalf of the community. So in that space, you've got an obligation to make sure the community are all on side in terms of what you're trying to do. Well, not all on side. Some you're not going to please everybody, so don't even try to sometimes, because you're going to have different different perspectives on things. It's all you can do is do the things that the committee said this is what we should do, because they're the ones who've been elected to do the job of governing. You're appointed to the job as managing, and you hopefully will be able to influence the governance bits, the strategic plans, the policies, that sort of stuff. That's what you're here to do. Any other questions?
Just to comment on that, with the way Dillinger does it, we do the report as a pure FYI, let the management committee ask clarifying questions, but no input. But if there's anything that requires input, then raise it in general business, referring back to the manager's report for them to put the input in, rather than having the discussion at the time of the report.
You do it the way it best suits your organisation and how your committee wants to run it. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure there is a separation between operational bits and strategic bits, planning bits, policy bits, because effectively that's what the differences are in the roles that you actually are required to undertake. I'm going to touch on a couple of these bits. Some people may have seen I'll go back a step first. That's all I wanted to say in relation to the, if you want to call it, the conditions of employment. When you get into this conditions of employment bit, we've got job description forms that are on the LinkWest website, so you can use that information to help you. There's also information about the salaries that are attached to those jobs. You'll see a small size CRC that might work in a local government or a local government entity. They'll decide the salaries for that. You'll have a smaller size CRCs that could fit within maybe level 4 or level 5, level 6 range, up to the sort of larger ones. And you'll see a range of different competencies that we think a CRC manager might need to have at the particular levels, like I use this for a loose example, that Mancham they do a lot of contract management work because they have a contract with transport to deliver transport services, licenses and that sort of stuff. And we are a small organisation that does everything of that. So in that job description, in those job description forms, they do vary, and they do vary in relation to the salaries. And you can follow that pretty simply by having a look at the descriptors that are in the SHADS award. In some organisations, the non-award type ones, look, I do know that there's been some agreements between some of the CRCs. They've banded together and said, well, the size of your organisation should be this, our organisation is this, and this one's this, and therefore the CRC managers can have a salary of this, this or this, depending on the size of it. And then the people who work in an organisation underneath the CRC manager will get paid this, this or this. And that there's no right or wrong in that space, because the organisations have done a bit of work in that space and decided that that's what they wanted to do. They want to be covered by a non-award rate. Then they can design the job description forms around that. I'll just go back before what I said before. It's about risk and about making sure no one gets paid less than the 1893 minimum salary rate. So there's information that's already on there, and what's also attached to that are employment contracts. So you've got a draft job description forms and a pro forma employment contract that you can take off the system. They're there. And if you need specific information in relation to employment contracts, adding things like traction retention benefits, I'm happy to put those sort of things in there that can give advice as to where that sits. But you don't need to then refer to a whole bunch of other stuff like about you'll get 4 weeks annual leave, etc. The employment contracts have been written in there basically saying they refer to the SHADS award, or they might refer to the local Long Service Leave Act. So there are things in there that are in there, but they can be mixed and matched. They don't have to be worded exactly the way it's worded in there, particularly if you've got non-award type arrangements. People have got non-award type arrangements. So that information is there. All I can basically suggest to you is if you need to use it. Because it is, we certainly ran past, I think, a few people in here and DPIRD, wasn't it, in terms of making sure we got that information pretty good, and I think it's come out pretty well. What I was going to just move on to, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on this morning, is about the competency framework for centre managers. We did put out a bit of a paper about what we thought the competency, skills and behaviours that are essential for a centre manager. Now, before I start talking, what I wanted to ask is about, from your perspectives, and I'd love it to be individually, what do you think your role is as a centre manager? So I'm handing the ball over to you, and I don't know who wants to start, but what do you think your role of the centre manager is, and what are the things that you think and they really need to be important in that space to do your job well? No one wants to put their hand up? Come on.
I'm happy to try and give it a go. Okay, well, I think there's a number of facets. Obviously, one of those is business growth, and that might involve whether that's marketing or identifying opportunities or assessing areas where maybe it hasn't been successful and either re-examining those or changing them or making the decision then. So having the courage to make a decision and say, well, we've been doing this for a long time and it's lost us money instead of made us money, so we're going to either restructure it or close it and move on to something else. So it's growth, business growth. People is obviously a pretty important part of that, and around the HR scope would be not just recruitment, obviously, but ongoing mentoring, ongoing support, ongoing performance management, succession planning, identifying where someone wants to be in 12 months and helping them get there. So that might then incorporate training, identify training gaps, identifying training opportunities. Then there's the financial side of that, and then obviously there's a fairly important part from the centre manager signing off on those parts before they get to the management committee. So having that sort of financial awareness about how to read a P&L, how to identify when things are going backwards, putting budgets together, assessing that from your actuals to your sort of your actuals to your budget, and then also having the knowledge to say, well, actually the variance is either too high or too low, and what's causing that variance, and whether that might mean being able to adjust the budget, whether you do it as a 6+6 or a 9+3. Then the other part is then the identifying funding opportunities elsewhere, so not just business opportunities, so whether that's through grants, tenders, the Empowering Communities tender that was recently put out to the network. And sometimes it's having, if it's not that person having the knowledge to write that tender, is knowing where they can source that information or identify training needs for the managers as well. So because it can be great opportunities to get grants and to get funding and to diversify what you do as a business. So I suppose there's financials, HR, the strategic planning obviously is not just writing one. It's then going back and monitoring it and seeing how you're actually faring with what you presented to the committee, what you presented to Link West. Where are we going with it? Do we need to change it? Are we on track with it? So it's that monitoring also that's involved in the strategic plan. I think one of the things that I would say is also about growing membership, obviously, and business growth. One of the things that I think I've fallen in the trap of and doing these step back in is too much around that organising the events. So yes, identify where events and where opportunities are lie to workshops, but to step back a little bit from that, because getting too involved in organising the day-to-day and running events is, I think it's not an effective use of a manager's time. It's a skill set that many people can take on. So that's the event management side of things. That just might be, setting your project schedules ahead so that you're 3, 6 to 12 months ahead on your projects as well, and workshops, and then feedback, how successful each of those have been. So that's my take.
Anybody else want to add anything to it?
I think you need to.
No. Just from that, it's a pretty big, isn't it? It's just from Carmel's little 3-minute talk in terms of what her job is as a CRC manager, but the interesting part in there is about how much development, how much building relationships becomes really, really important in that space, because if you've got the people who you can rely on in terms of at least assisting in that space or providing input to that, it becomes really, really intangible. It becomes so important. You can't understate that in terms of that at all. And how long it takes you to build relationships. And I guess I can ask, well, I can certainly ask Carmel this, but I certainly ask Tracy Ann, because I know she's only been there for a short amount of time. How long does it take to start building relationships? You've only been in the role for a very short time, but how much do you devote to the time for that space?
It's been massive. There's so much extra volunteer time as well. So, the business sector don't actually know what we do, and so it's been a real process. Fortunately, because we are local now, people know us as people, and so everyone in the committee, as well as the staff, are known for who they are, and we're bringing people into the centre because of the local knowledge. So slowly it's getting around, but I've been here nearly 7 months, and there's just so much to learn about how to go about that process of just trying to explain to people what it is we do and how we impact. And so I've found, for me particularly, it's coming back into the community that I've known for over 25 years. People are connecting with me again from previous history and coming in and experiencing and thinking, oh crap, we didn't know this was here. So we're developing new relationships and reconnecting in a way that wasn't possible before. So, but it's massive. I mean, we're only just starting to see where the custom is increasing. We've got a lot more scope for the activities that we think that the community is looking for. But it's everything's still happening for the first time for me. So I can't look ahead yet. I don't know what's in front of me. I've got to just keep dealing with what I'm faced with and hope I can get through that bit before wait for the cycle to come through. So yeah, but it's been massive.
Anybody else got any comments in that space? No?
Kate from Bremer Bay.
Yeah, I definitely can sympathise, having been just in the job for about 8 months now, and coming into a very small community. It's very, it's a daily task with every interaction, to be able to build on the community's confidence in you, and being able to just, I suppose, catch a tail and get your head around everything that's going on. I particularly came in without any handover. There was no manager in the role when I arrived. So I am still doing it today, and I will continue to do it for probably a number of months to come. But just getting your head around everything to then be able to work in a proactive manner is very challenging every day. And I'm super busy all the time. We have very minimal staff. So I am doing quite an active operational side of things in everything that I do, unfortunately. It's just the current, we're on a positive and progress sort of working upwards, and we've come a long way from where we were even before I arrived. And so I think we'll get to a better place, but at the moment I am still having an active hands-on role in pretty much everything that we have to organise, which is a challenge.
Anybody else who'd add to it?
John's actually, sorry, go for it, Russell. John's just sent another comment through, but I'll wait and go.
Similar to the last two, I've been wearing this hat for 8 weeks now. So I'm really new in the role, so just trying to figure out everything. One of my challenges is I was promoted internally to the acting role while our manager is on long service leave, which was long overdue. So I come from being the part-time project officer to the full-time hands-on. So not only do I actively have the hands-on daily, but I need to learn how to take the hands back off as well, because I've got staff under me to do the day-to-day work. So it's just that juggling act of learning more of the governance side of things, which I haven't really had much to do with in terms of the dealing with the committee strategically and doing the operations in-house, and just managing all the expectations of all key parties and developing the relationships with the community. I'm been in this community for 6 years now, but my former hats were in a different complete skill set. So it's a matter of reteaching the community who I am as well. And it's, a lot of stuff to learn in a very quick amount of time.
Yeah, it is. Look, and I guess some of the things that I'm hearing you say, and this is how I interpret it, is that behaviours become absolutely essential. And behaviours in relation to building relationships is the primary part of what you're actually talking about. So you need to behave in such a way that you do create relationships that become productive, and they become long-lasting, and they become value-adding. Because if you don't behave in such a way, in a way that people can respect and maybe comprehend what you're trying to get to and what you're trying to achieve, then at the end of the day they'll just say, oh, someone would come in and I just don't like the way he behaved. He sort of was obnoxious, pushed his point, didn't open up the conversation, didn't ask my opinion, just basically dictated about what we're going to do. So behaviours become really, really, really essential. And behaviours basically comes back to that part I was saying about values. about you need to work in such a way that your behaviours espouse what the organisation wants to be and how it wants to be seen in the community, and then you get your employees to do the same thing. Is that these are the behaviours that we want to see from our people. We want to have a good customer relationship. We don't want people who are ignorant. And basically, when the community, someone comes in from the community and happens to be an elderly person, that you don't treat them exactly the same as you would anybody else. That you give them the time that you would give everybody else time, and you might give them more time too. Just so because of the way that you want to see as your role in the community, or the CRC's role in the community, and how the organisation is seen and how its employees behave. Because it becomes about, you know, active listening, about being responsive to what people say. If someone says something to you and you don't have the answer, you go back to them with a response. It's about behaviours. So it's really important that when you go down this track of creating relationships, then you work out the sort of behaviours that you think you need to have in place. You behave differently when you're talking to a business person, I'm sure. I'm sure it's different to working to a person who comes in off the street and says, I want to get some photocopying done. Or can you help me in relation to getting some payments organised through the community, or whatever payments involved for family centres or whatever, or through the Commonwealth. Is that you need people who can basically behave in such a way consistently that the organisation is reflected. It reflects its behaviours into the organisation. And I'll use real life examples in here again, and I won't tell you where this was, but it was one of the CRCs where the people who worked in that particular organisation thought that what they had to do was really do the governance bits. They were trying to do the governance bits as possibly well as they can, but their interactions with the community were negligible. So their behaviours were seen as being standoffish, not inclusive, ignorant. So therefore the organisation was seeing exactly that. So therefore the organisation wasn't seen in the broader community as being any value adding, so why go there? Because they do nothing for us. I don't know, actually I don't even know what they do, because we don't even see the information coming out of that space. So, and it came back to the behaviours of the individuals that sit within the organisation. So can't underemphasise the importance of behaviours that are in keeping with what your values are as an organisation. So if you're going to go down this track of saying we want to be a customer-focused organisation that is entrenched with what the community wants us to be, well, work out what the behaviours you might need to have in place from you and your employees. And then you go and recruit for it. Okay, you want people who, you can always train people in relation to doing an activity. I'll use a loose example. Someone might need to get trained in MyOb. You can train people to use MyOb. You can't train them to talk. Okay, so they have to have those soft skills. So the things that you are going out and when you're doing your recruiting processes on, you'll get the hard skills, get the person who can use the MyOb. But what's the soft skills? What behaviours do you want to have? What sort of person fits within the mould of Harvey Community Resource Centre? And this is the sort of person that we want to get that comes and work in Harvey Community Resource Centre, and we'll train them in relation to the hard skills, but we want a person who's empathetic, you know, is understanding and comes across as being caring, and because they're the things that we want, that we believe are most important in the organisation. And the hard skills, we'll train them up. We'll train them up in that space, and they will get better and better and better. But it's harder to train a person to behave differently when they have never behaved that way in their life. It makes it very difficult. It's really, really hard to do, because I always treat it that way. You know, I always ignore people because that's how I always have been. And now you want me to be an engaging person? I can't cop it. You know, so it's difficult to get the right sort of, you want to call it, match in terms of behaviours, as opposed to getting hard skills. So when you go out to do your recruitment stuff, and this is largely to you too as a CRC manager, is what attracted you to come to work in the CRC in the first place? Then what are those people who you've now employed to do? What attracted them to come to the CRC? Why do they want to work there? And you can frame questions around that sort of process, and you can start to gauge about what's important to that person in relation to their employment. If it's money, like John raised before, he's got a pretty happy workplace, so that means the employees are pretty engaged inside the CRC. So they're probably behaving really well, and the organisation is seeing very well in relation to what the community thinks it should do. Find one that's different, and there are plenty of them. There are plenty of them where the employees, it's just a job. I just come along to do the work and then I leave and go home. You'll find that a lot in large organisations, but in a small organisation such as a CRC, you can't afford it. You can't afford to have people who aren't bought in, who aren't buying into what you think is really important to the organisation, the values that you espouse to be. So just mindful of that in terms of the sort of behaviours that you want to reflect, because the leadership you provide basically will go down to the staff that you employ and the ones that work in your centre. So how you behave is how likely that they'll behave to the people that they report to them, or that they provide the service to. So just important that do you find that does that reflect in your workplaces?
Definitely.
Yes. Is that in general how you found it? Russell, you've been there for obviously a short time, but now a long time. Is that how you've worked under a centre manager? Now you are the centre manager?
Yep.
So was the centre manager pretty good in terms of his values and the behaviours?
Yeah, she was really good.
Yep. And are you now reflecting those behaviours that she, I guess...
Trying to.
Right onto you, yeah. And then what about above you then, about the committee and the way they behave?
Yeah, they're taking me under their wing and trying to help out as much as they can. And biggest challenge is we had our AGM last night, which folded due to a lack of a quorum. So at the moment, I don't know who my committee is. So
okay.
Actively trying to recruit.
Yeah, but go on, Tracy.
Can I add something? I also think that the manager's role as the conduit between the committee and the staff is absolutely vital, because working in the small centres we work in, it's so important to know that the staff are happy and that they have a voice, and that when we go to the committee, their voice is heard, and that the committee's voice, when we take it back to the staff, is heard. I'm very fortunate to have such a fantastic committee supporting me and helping me through the learning process. But it's been equally important for me, because to create a team and to be able to express our values to the community, and the team has to come together as one person with the same thoughts, the same feelings, and to be able to work almost as one person. But when there is conflict in the team, and the manager has to be the mediator, the conduit, it's very difficult to. There's so much intuition involved in the whole process of bringing a team together so that everyone's working on the same page. So yeah, I've found that both very rewarding and also very, very challenging to try and, when we do have the need for the skills, but not necessarily the empathic nature to go with it, to be able to work out how that person can best fit into the team that is working so closely with community.
Yeah, it is. Anybody else got any comments in there?
John has a couple.
Go on.
on the line, who's been with you now, in terms of what the role of, or the competencies of the CRC manager. He says, manage the business of the CRC, which incorporates contract management, people management and financial management, and being aware of what the community, people and business sees as important. Then he also added, knowing your community and them knowing you is an ongoing job. Never think that everybody knows your business. And he added onto that, the CRC hasn't had a change of staff since 2013, except for trainees. So,
yeah,
good job.
I guess there's a real value in that space, you know, where you've got a continuity of people, but it just comes back to the essential things about behaviours. I can't underemphasise the importance of that enough. Is that people, you need to walk the talk. You can't say it any other way than that. You need to walk the talk. So if you say this is what we're about and this is the way we're going to go and do things, then guess what? You have to stick to it. Because once you move away from that and do something that's untoward, like if you don't have your employees' backs, for example, then if something happens to one of your employees and one of the community members doesn't like what happened to a particular employee, and you don't, then if you say, no, I'm going to stick with you, and unless you've done something specifically bad, wrong, whatever it might be, I'm going to stick with your approach, then effectively if you go behind that approach, then the person says, well, 1 minute you're with me, and the next minute you're not. And then that gets around to the other employees, and it becomes a stigma in relation to how you are then seen by people. So it's really just important that if you're going to do something, if you're going to say something that's about how you're going to treat people, like if you're going to do performance management, and you say, I'm going to be open and honest, okay? I'm going to be open and honest. So you say open and honest, you go open and honest. So these are the things that I don't like about your performance. These are the things that I think, but then you've got to put it on the other side, you know, the measured side, and this is what I think you could do to improve. And these are the measures we're going to try and help you to do improvement on. So if 1 minute you got the stick out, and next minute you got you're going to call it the handout, saying I'm going to help you going to where you need to get to. So that's the honesty part, the open and honest, candid discussions that you need to have, because don't go hiding behind issues about, oh, they might take me to the Industrial Relations Commission or the Fair Work Commission because of an unfair dismissal. If you do the right things, then invariably what happens is people will leave anyway. Because they'll get the message they're not probably right in the right fit, in the right area, they don't have the right skill set, or they don't behave the way that you want to behave. So if you set out, these are the intangibles in relation to values, and there will be no shying away from that, then if you set the scene, then effectively it becomes much easier to manage. And you can manage poor performance by dealing with things in that space. So that if you don't think someone's up to the mark, then show them the reasons why, and then show them the reasons why, that they have the ways that they can improve. And if they don't improve, then it becomes a much easier process to move people on, if that's what happens. And then you go out to recruit the right sort of people who are going to bring in value to your organisation. So it's about those behaviours and about how you do things, because that's what people will look at. They will look at not what you said most times. They might want to see how you said it. So just be mindful about, you know, like sometimes you might zip the mouth up rather than shoot off something. Think about it for 10 minutes, 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days, because of something an employee might have said, and you might think, I'm not going to respond at the time. I'll respond when I need to respond and do it in a more thoughtful manner. Then effectively that's part of your behaviours. That, you know, I'm not going to impromptu just fly off my handle about something that might have happened. No, I'll think about it. And then take an action when I need to take an action. So it's about those things, because then you then start to intrinse that back into the organisation, in the people that are beneath you. And then you start pushing it up the line, effectively saying, if the chair or someone's having a crack at one of the employees or having a crack at you in relation to something that might have happened, then you might just basically say, yeah, take it on board, rather than fly up the handle. Then you might go back in some kind of structured way about, well, hang on, you've got about this, and this, and this, and this, and this. So it's just about, because once you start to set that scene, then you are actually then creating a culture, that what you want in the organisation. And the behaviours are absolutely linked to that for sure. I'm mindful of the time. It's near 12 o'clock and we said we're going to be 2 hours. I think we're going to have some more of these sessions.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure we are.
Yep.
And I probably will go a bit further on maybe next time around a bit more about the competencies of the centre manager, but there's a couple of other topics that I wanted to talk about too in time. But hopefully you found it interesting this morning, at least insightly, that there's some value to you in sitting here for 2 hours listening to this raspy voice, and I've got a raspy voice now. I need other than water, I need something else. So I hope you found that I guess value adding, because if it's not value adding, then I shouldn't be here. Because if I haven't added value to something that you didn't know or now know, then I'm happy. If it's been a waste of time, then I'm not happy. And then I'll have to go back and look about what we do and how we've done things. So is there anything we could have done better from your perspectives?
We will send out a bit of a feedback survey after the session to all the participants, so if there is anything you want to add anonymously, you can do that. But yeah, I think everyone's pretty happy.
I like things up front. Tell me if I'm being useless. Woodduck hasn't talked a lot of rubbish. I'll be happy with that. I can walk away from here. I've got shoulders and been around for too long to worry about things like that.
Can I quickly add something? It's Sun Young speaking. No, it was really good. Thank you so much. It was definitely worthwhile, and I think it just reminds you that you need to put things into practice maybe a bit more, or just how you go about your day. So it was very worthwhile. So thank you. I guess one thing I was hoping to maybe get a little bit more out was a bit more about salary and rates. We've been around for 3 years. We're a very new CRC, and this is our first time on contract. So I'm still full time, and it wasn't until I had a really bad allergic to hair dye that the committee realised that we need to hire someone part time, because as a risk management there was no one else that knew the ins and outs of the daily operations. So lesson learnt there by both me and the committee. Yeah, just about salary and rates, because since we've hired more staff. And then speaking to other coordinators, just when we opened, it was a ring around to other CRCs, and this is what coordinators were kind of paid, and the committee just went with that. And then since learning more about the SCADS award, hiring a trainee, and having to do all of that HR stuff myself, which was new to me, I then learned where I kind of sat, and it was really interesting to see how big the difference is. And I know that we're all very different centres, and we all, as coordinators, have very similar roles, but we obviously adapt to suit our community. But I found the difference in salary rates was huge, like $5 to $10 difference an hour between what I was earning and other coordinators. And I don't know if there's, I don't know how you find a level playing field, but after a lot of research and speaking with some CRCs, it was just interesting to see where the salary rates were, and if there's like a happy medium that we can all start at, because the committee didn't know until I probably did a bit of research, and then they had to do a little bit themselves as well to see what they thought where I'd sit. But yeah, I think I found that was very all over the place across the network, asking for a pay rise twice in between hiring different staff, and just noticing that either I was getting left behind, or the value for work that I do in daily. But yeah, that was I was hoping to maybe touch on salary rates and see if there is a happy medium for coordinators, and obviously it changes on what each person does, but no, that was my only feedback or comment.
Just on that, Alison, isn't it? Alison, yes. Look, on that, Alison, more than happy to help you in that space. And because I can't give you, if I gave you general advice and say this is what I think you should do, I probably be more thinking about getting a bit more handle on what your size of your organisation is, because all those sorts of things and what you do as an organisation, what services you provide, because all of those are factors in relation to salary. So they're the things that matter the most. And I'll use live examples in here in relation to Harvey and Augusta. I think both the CRC managers have been paid level 6 of the SHADS award, both of them. And I can go back in other organisations where I think even Management, which is a bigger organisation again, as opposed to both of those, are also getting paid level 6. And I can think of other ones who are being paid level 5. So, and I can think of other ones who are getting paid salary rates lower than level 5 under the Shouts Award. So it is a horses for courses bit, and that's what I said about before about committees about deciding about how much you can afford. Because I'll always go back and say, what can you afford to pay? Because it's a business, and businesses have to be able to afford to pay. So if you can't afford to pay, what can you afford to pay? But can you afford to then think about this in the bigger picture about how you might be able to increase your revenue base in order to pay the right amount of money? So there's all those sorts of factors. More than happy to provide that. I can do this in a general sense, or I can do it you specifically. So I can do that both ways.
I'd be interested too.
Okay. So I've got Bremer Bay and Dalwallinu.
W.
W, sorry, yep. Gotcha.
And it looks like Mariana from Wagen is also keen for some
And Wagen?
I'd be keen as well.
Yeah, okay. Dalwallinu as well.
Okay.
Well, interesting area.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I don't know if you probably wouldn't have seen, but I just seen them. But both Carmel and Tracy Ann didn't say anything because I think we've done some work in those places already. so we've done a bit of work in there. You know, like I think, God, Augusta was about 2015, wasn't it? Carmel? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was just before I started, which was nearly 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was, and then Harvey was only in February, I think, if I remember rightly. So it's more than happy to help you. So I've got those things down. So we'll contact you in terms of what the things that you're looking for and get some information out to you.
Yeah, it sounds like if 4 out of 6 participants on here are interested, then likely a lot of other CRCs
I would suspect so. That's probably going to be a topical issue.
Yeah, so maybe in a later session.
Yeah, we could do that in this later session, yeah.
I mean, it's a general thing, so it's a bit hard in that sense, but...
Yeah, we'll probably go back and provide some general information, but also provide some specific information for you too. So things that might be relevant to your workplace. Any other parts that we could do better? Questions? No? Cool. Well, we're done. Thanks for your time. I do appreciate it very much. Now our contact number and email address, I know Joanne's got it. If you need it, then I'm sure she'll send it out to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks very much for that. Much appreciated. Have a good morning or good rest of the day.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Thanks, Jo.
everyone. And
Bye.
Joanna, thank you.
Bye. Thanks.